The community center in Pine Creek was quieter now. The yearly talent show had just wrapped up and most folks had already headed home. Only a handful of people were still around, gathering their things or chatting in small groups. The big overhead lights had been dimmed, leaving just enough glow to see by. Tom Rivers moved across the wooden stage with his mop and bucket, his footsteps barely making a sound. At 42, he had the kind of face that told stories without saying a word. Laugh lines around his eyes, a furrow between his brows from years of worry, and a gentle smile that appeared more in his eyes than on his lips. Nobody really paid attention to the man in the gray work uniform. To them, he was just part of the background like the chairs and tables. Tom didn't mind. He'd gotten used to being invisible over the 3 years he'd worked here. The evening shift suited him fine. It meant he could spend his days with his 10-year-old daughter Lily. "Great job tonight, Diane," called the center director to the last performer leaving through the back door. "Your singing was beautiful." Tom nodded politely as the woman passed by. She smiled back but didn't really see him. Few people did these days. Even fewer knew that Tom Rivers once had a very different life planned out. As he worked his way across the stage, wiping down microphone stands and folding chairs, his eyes kept drifting to the grand piano sitting center stage. It was a beautiful instrument, polished black, its surface reflecting the dim stage lights like a mirror. The piano had been the star of tonight's show, accompanying singers, backing up a violin player, and even taking center stage for a teenager's somewhat shaky rendition of a classical piece. Tom knew the piece had been Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, though the young performer had struggled with the tempo. Not that Tom would ever say anything. Who was he to judge? Just the guy who cleaned the floors. He carefully moved his bucket to the side of the stage and approached the piano. It needed to be wiped down before being covered for the night. Tom pulled a soft cloth from his pocket and began to gently clean, the dust from its surface, his movements respectful, almost reverent. "You like that old thing?" Tom startled and turned to see Mrs. Chen, one of the volunteers who helped organize community events. She was gathering programs from between the seats in the front row. "It's a beautiful instrument," Tom said, his voice soft. "Yamaha C7X. They don't make them quite like this anymore." Mrs. Chen looked surprised. "You know pianos?" Tom shrugged. "A little bit." That was the understatement of the year. Once upon a time, Thomas Rivers had been a student at the prestigious Eastman School of Music, with dreams of concert halls and symphony orchestras. Life had other plans. "Do you play?" Mrs. Chen asked, genuinely curious now. "Used to," Tom replied, continuing his careful cleaning of the piano. "Long time ago." Mrs. Chen seemed like she wanted to ask more questions, but just then her phone rang. She excused herself and walked toward the exit, leaving Tom alone with the piano. His daughter Lily would be waiting outside. Tom's neighbor, a kind older woman named Ruth, walked Lily to the community center most evenings after her homework was done. They had a routine. Lily would read books or draw pictures in the small staff break room until Tom finished his shift at 9. Tom checked his watch. It was only 7:30. Most nights he'd be cleaning the bathrooms by now, but the talent show had run long. He still had the stage to finish, then the hallway and lobby. His hand moved absently across the piano's keys, not pressing down, just feeling their smooth surface. It had been years since he'd really played. The small keyboard he kept in the apartment wasn't the same, and he rarely found time for it anyway. Between work, Lily's school activities, and keeping their tiny apartment in order. Life hadn't turned out how he'd planned, not even close. But Tom wasn't one to dwell on what might have been. He had Lily. That was enough. He thought of his daughter waiting in the break room, probably reading one of her fantasy novels. Since her mother had passed away 4 years ago, a quick and ruthless battle with cancer, Tom had done everything possible to keep Lily's world stable. He'd taken this job specifically because it allowed him to be there when she got home from school, to help with homework, to make dinner. The pay wasn't great, but the flexibility was worth it. "We need to lock up soon, Tom," called the center's night manager, a college kid named Jake who was always in a hurry to close up. "Almost done. Tom called back, his hand still resting lightly on the piano. The community center was quiet now, almost everyone gone. The building settled around him with the occasional creak and groan old buildings make when they cool down for the night. Something about the stillness, the dim lights, and the beautiful piano before him stirred something in Tom's chest. An ache, a longing, a memory of who he used to be. Before bills and responsibilities, before grief and single parenthood, before life had worn him down to just getting through each day. He glanced around. The auditorium was empty now. Jake was probably in his office counting the day's cash and preparing the deposit. Without really deciding to, Tom sat down on the bench. His work-roughened hands hovered over the keys. Once, these same hands had been described by his professor as having the sensitivity and precision of a surgeon. Now they were calloused, with a small burn scar on the right one from a kitchen accident, and perpetually dry from cleaning chemicals. Would they even remember? Tom pressed one key softly. The note rang out clear and true in the empty auditorium. Then another, and another. Just simple scales at first, his fingers remembering their paths like a traveler finding their way home after a long absence. It felt both strange and familiar, like speaking a language he hadn't used in years. His fingers were stiffer than they once were, less nimble. But the muscle memory remained. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he knew he should stop. Get back to work, finish cleaning, pick up Lily, head home to their small apartment with its leaky faucet and noisy refrigerator, but instead he began to play in earnest. The piece came to him without conscious thought, Debussy's Clair de Lune, his wife's favorite. He'd played it at their wedding, and again during the small memorial service they'd held for her in the hospital chapel. As he played, Tom closed his eyes. The music flowed through him like water finding its course downstream, natural and inevitable. His breathing slowed. His shoulders, usually tight from physical labor, relaxed. In this moment, he wasn't Tom the janitor, Tom the struggling single dad, Tom the widower. He was simply a musician, speaking the language of his heart through his fingers. The first movement was tentative, like a shy hello from an old friend. But as he continued, his confidence grew. The piece bloomed under his touch, filling the empty auditorium with its gentle, moonlit melody. Tom had forgotten what this felt like, this sense of connection, of speaking without words, of expressing the inexpressible. For years, music had been his voice, his solace, his joy. Somehow, in the struggle to simply survive, he'd let it slip away. In the dim light of the empty auditorium, with no one to hear but the ghosts of his past and the silent chairs, Tom Rivers played with all the passion and skill he'd once been known for. His body swayed slightly as the music built, his face transformed by the concentration and emotion flowing through him. He didn't notice when the back door of the auditorium opened quietly. Didn't see his daughter Lily slip in, her book clutched to her chest, wondering where her dad was and why she could hear piano music. Didn't notice when Jake the night manager followed her in, his mouth opening in surprise at the sight of the maintenance man hunched over the grand piano, creating sounds of heartbreaking beauty. And Tom certainly didn't see the center director, Patricia Williams, pause on her way out, her coat half on, arrested by the unexpected music drifting through the building. He didn't notice as she stepped back into the auditorium, her eyes widening as she realized who was playing. Tom was lost in the music, in memories, in the momentary freedom of being who he once was, who he might have been in another life. The piece was approaching its climax now, his hands dancing across the keys with increasing intensity, the notes rising and falling like waves. In that moment, he was no longer invisible. As the final notes of Clair de Lune faded into silence, Tom opened his eyes, coming back to himself slowly, like waking from a dream. Only then did he become aware of the small audience that had gathered at the back of the room. His daughter, the night manager, and the center director, all staring at him with expressions of astonishment. And only then did he realize that something had shifted, irrevocably, in the quiet evening air of the community center. Something that had been sleeping for a very long time had awakened. Something that would change everything. The silence that followed Tom's impromptu performance seemed to stretch on forever. He sat frozen on the piano bench, his hand still hovering over the keys, suddenly aware of the 3 pairs of eyes fixed on him from the back of the auditorium. His daughter Lily was the first to break the spell. She rushed down the center aisle, her sneakers squeaking against the polished floor, her face lit with wonder. "Dad, that was amazing," she exclaimed, reaching the stage and looking up at him with wide eyes. "I didn't know you could play like that." Tom felt heat creeping up his neck. I used to play. A long time ago." Patricia Williams, the center director, approached more slowly, her expression a mixture of confusion and awe. Jake, the young night manager, trailed behind her, phone in hand. "Tom," Patricia said, using his name in a way that suggested she was just now truly seeing him for the first time. "That would extraordinary. Truly extraordinary." Tom stood up quickly, smoothing down his gray work uniform. "I'm sorry," he said, reaching for his mop. "I shouldn't have been sorry." Patricia interrupted, her eyebrows shooting up. "My goodness, don't apologize. That was Debussy, wasn't it? Played beautifully." Tom nodded, surprised she recognized the piece. "I was a music minor in college," she explained, noticing his expression. "Though I never could play like that." She glanced at the piano, then back at Tom. "Where did you learn to play that way?" Lily was watching her father with newfound curiosity. At 10 years old, she had never really known this side of him. To her, Dad was the guy who made slightly burnt pancakes on Sunday mornings and helped with math homework. The guy who worked hard and always seemed a little tired but never complained. "I studied at Eastman," Tom said quietly. Before life took a different turn." Patricia's eyes widened. "Eastman School of Music, that's a long time ago," Tom finished, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. He glanced at his watch. "Lily, we should get going. It's getting late." "But Dad, I still have to finish cleaning," Tom said firmly, reaching for his mop again. Patricia put her hand on the mop handle, stopping him. "Jake can finish up here," she said, ignoring Jake's surprised look. "I'd like to talk to you for a moment, please." Something in her tone made Tom hesitate. He looked down at Lily, who was practically bouncing with excitement, clearly not ready to leave this moment behind. 5 minutes, he conceded. "Then we really need to go." Patricia nodded and turned to Jake. "Would you mind taking Lily to get a hot chocolate from the vending machine? There should be enough change in the office drawer." Once they were alone, Patricia gestured to the piano bench. "May I?" Tom nodded, and she sat down, patting the spot beside her. Reluctantly, he joined her. "I've worked with you for 3 years, Tom," she began. 3 years of good morning and good night, and the sink in the women's restroom is clogged again. And in all that time I never knew." She shook her head in disbelief. "Why haven't you ever mentioned your background in music?" Tom shrugged, his eyes fixed on the piano keys. It didn't seem relevant to mopping floors and changing light bulbs. "Not relevant?" Patricia repeated. "Tom, talent like yours is always relevant." A humorless laugh escaped him. "Talent doesn't pay the bills, doesn't provide health insurance for a kid." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "What happened?" she asked gently. "If you don't mind my asking, why didn't you pursue music professionally?" The question hung in the air between them. Tom hadn't talked about this in years, not with friends, what few he had, not with coworkers, not even with Lily, who was too young to understand most of it anyway. But something about tonight, about playing again after so long, about being truly seen for the first time in years, loosened something in his chest. "My wife, Beth," he began, his voice low. "We met at Eastman. She was a violinist, brilliant, passionate. We had all these plans. We were going to tour together, maybe teach eventually." His fingers absently played a silent melody on his knee as he spoke. "Then she got pregnant with Lily. Surprise of our lives." He smiled faintly at the memory. "We were young, broke students, but we were so happy about it. We decided I'd finish my degree while Beth took a year off. I'd try for orchestral work and she'd go back later." Patricia listened quietly, her eyes never leaving his face. Then Beth's dad got sick. Alzheimer's. Her mom couldn't handle it. Alone. We moved back to help out. Tom's voice grew tighter. I took whatever work I could find. Teaching a few piano students, playing at a restaurant on weekends, it wasn't enough. So I got a job at a warehouse. Better pay. Benefits. He flexed his hands, looking down at them. After a while, I barely played anymore. There was always something more important. Beth's dad getting worse, Lily needing things, bills piling up. Tom fell silent, the weight of years of sacrifices evident in the slump of his shoulders. And then, Patricia prompted gently, and then Beth got sick. The words came out flat, as if saying them with any emotion would be too much to bear. It happened so fast, 6 months from diagnosis to the end. Patricia's hand came to rest, lightly on his arm. I'm so sorry, Tom. He nodded, acknowledging her sympathy. Afterward, there were medical bills, so much debt. I sold the piano to cover some of it, took this job because the hours worked with being there for Lily. He looked up at Patricia with a small, sad smile. And here we are. Here we are, she echoed softly. From the hallway came the sound of Lily's laughter, bright and clear. Tom straightened, as if the sound reminded him of his responsibilities. Like I said, it was a long time ago, he said, standing up. Another life. But Patricia wasn't ready to let it go. Tom, we have a music program here at the center. Nothing fancy, just some basic lessons for kids whose parents can't afford private teachers. Our piano instructor moved to Florida last month, and we haven't found a replacement yet. Tom was already shaking his head. I'm not a teacher. You studied at Eastman, Patricia countered. That's more qualification than most. It's just twice a week, early evenings. The pay isn't much, but it's better than... She caught herself. Better than cleaning toilets? Tom finished, a hint of defensiveness in his voice. Patricia met his gaze steadily. Better than letting a gift like yours go to waste? Before Tom could respond, the auditorium doors swung open and Lily bounded in, clutching a steaming paper cup, with Jake following behind. Dad, they had hot chocolate and cookies, she announced triumphantly. Then, noticing the serious expressions on the adults' faces, she asked, What are you talking about? Nothing important, Tom said quickly. Just grown-up stuff. Patricia rose from the bench. Actually, Lily, I was just asking your dad if he might be interested in teaching piano lessons here at the center. She smiled warmly at the girl. Would you like that? Having your dad teach music here? Lily's eyes grew wide. Really? You'd be a music teacher? The excitement in her voice was unmistakable. That would be the coolest thing ever. Tom looked at his daughter's hopeful face, then back at Patricia. I don't know. It's been a long time since I've played seriously. From what I just heard, some things you don't forget, Patricia said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a business card. Think about it over the weekend. Call me Monday if you're interested. Tom took the card automatically, slipping it into his pocket. We really should get going, he said. It's past Lily's bedtime. Patricia nodded, understanding his need to retreat and process. Of course, Jake can finish up here. She turned to the night manager. Lock up when you're done, please. As Tom and Lily walked through the quiet community center toward the exit, his mind was spinning. The feel of the piano keys under his fingers had awakened something he'd long buried. Not just the music itself, but the person he used to be. The person who had dreams beyond survival. Dad? Lily's voice broke into his thoughts as they stepped out into the cool night air. Are you going to do it? Teach piano lessons? Tom looked down at his daughter, her face illuminated by the parking lot lights, her eyes full of hope and admiration. For years, he had focused solely on providing stability for her, a roof over her head, food on the table, a parent who was present despite everything they'd lost. But tonight, for the first time, he wondered if he'd been missing something important. If, in his determination to be the responsible parent, he'd hidden too much of himself away. If Lily needed to see not just the dad who took care of her, but also the man who had passions and talents and dreams. "I don't know, kiddo," he said, honestly, taking her hand as they walked toward the bus stop. "It's complicated." "Why?" she asked with the straightforward curiosity of a child. "You play beautifully, Mrs. Williams said so." Tom smiled faintly. "There's a lot more to teaching than just being able to play." "Like what?" "Like patience, knowledge, the right temperament." Lily considered this as they waited for the bus. "You help me with my homework every night," she pointed out. "Even when I get frustrated with fractions, that takes patience." Tom couldn't argue with that logic. "And you know everything about music," she continued. "You always tell me interesting facts about the songs on the radio." "That's different," Tom said, but he was smiling now. "I think you'd be a great teacher," Lily declared with the absolute certainty that only children possess. "And maybe you could save up and buy a piano for our apartment, a small one." The bus appeared at the corner, its headlights cutting through the darkness. "Maybe," Tom said softly, more to himself than to Lily. "Maybe." As they boarded the bus, the weight of Patricia's card seemed to burn in his pocket. Not a burden, but a possibility. A door opening to a version of himself he'd thought was gone forever. For the first time in years, Tom allowed himself to wonder, what if? The weekend passed in a blur of routine for Tom. Saturday morning cartoons with Lily, laundry at the coin-operated machines down the block, grocery shopping with their carefully planned list. Sunday brought rain, so they stayed in their small apartment. Lily reading her library books while Tom paid bills at the kitchen table, his calculator and checkbook spread out before him. But underneath the ordinary rhythm of their days, something had changed. Tom caught Lily watching him with new eyes, as if trying to reconcile the father she knew with the man who had played so beautifully on the piano. Several times, she brought up Patricia's offer about teaching at the community center, her voice casual, but her eyes hopeful. "I'm thinking about it," was all Tom would say. The truth was, he couldn't stop thinking about it. The feeling of the piano keys beneath his fingers had awakened something he'd buried years ago, like finding an old photograph of yourself and suddenly remembering who you used to be. Monday morning arrived with weak sunshine and the usual rush to get Lily off to school. As Tom poured cereal into bowls, Lily looked up at him expectantly. "Are you going to call Mrs. Williams today?" Tom sighed, setting the milk carton down. "I don't know, Lily, it's not that simple." "Why not?" Her small face was serious, more grown up than her years. "You love playing. I saw you." Tom sat down across from her. "Sometimes grown-ups have to make practical choices, not just do what they love." "But Mrs. Williams said it pays better than—" She stopped herself, a flicker of understanding crossing her face. "Oh, you're worried about your cleaning job." Sometimes Lily's perceptiveness caught him off guard. "Yes," he admitted. "I'd have to give up some of my regular hours to teach, and I'm not sure if the music classes would be enough to make up the difference." "Oh." Lily stirred her cereal, thinking. But what if— The apartment buzzer interrupted her. Tom frowned, checking his watch. "That's your ride to school. Better hurry." Lily's carpool with the neighbor's kid was waiting. She quickly gulped down the rest of her breakfast and grabbed her backpack. At the door, she turned back to look at her father. "Dad? I think Mom would want you to try." The words hit Tom like a physical blow. Lily rarely mentioned her mother. The fact that she had brought Beth up now in connection with the piano felt significant. "I'll think about it," he promised, more seriously this time. After the door closed behind her, Tom pulled Patricia's business card from his wallet. He turned it over in his hands a few times, then placed it on the counter without making the call. Later that afternoon, Tom arrived at the community center for his shift. He kept his head down as he collected his cleaning cart from the supply closet, half expecting Patricia to appear and ask about her offer. But the center was busy with an after-school program, and he managed to clean the bathrooms and mop the hallways without running into her. As the evening progressed and the center quieted, Tom found himself drawn once again to the auditorium. The grand piano sat where he had left it, gleaming under the stage lights. He told himself he was just checking to make sure it was properly covered for the night. But as he approached the instrument, his steps slowed. He glanced at his watch. 7:15. Lily wouldn't arrive for another half hour. She was at her friend's house working on a science project. Almost without conscious thought, Tom sat down at the piano bench. This time, he didn't hesitate. His fingers found the keys naturally and he began to play. Not Debussy tonight, but Chopin, the Nocturne in E-flat major, one of the first pieces he had mastered as a serious student. His hands remembered even after all this time. The music flowed from him as if a dam had broken, all the years of silence rushing out in a flood of sound. He was so absorbed in the music that he didn't notice the auditorium doors opening. Didn't see people pausing in the hallway, drawn by the unexpected concert. By the time he finished the piece, a small crowd had gathered at the back of the room, mostly teenagers from the youth program and a few staff members. The applause startled him. Tom turned on the bench, feeling his face grow hot as he realized he had an audience. "Encore," called one of the older teens, a boy who usually avoided eye contact with the cleaning staff. Tom shook his head, starting to rise. "Please?" The request came from a girl standing near the front, maybe 14 or 15. That was beautiful. Something in her earnest expression made Tom hesitate. He glanced toward the back of the auditorium and saw Patricia standing in the doorway, a knowing smile on her face. She gave him a small nod of encouragement. Tom turned back to the piano. "One more," he said quietly and began to play. This time he chose something different. Not classical, but a folk melody his mother had taught him as a child. Simple and haunting, it was the kind of tune that seemed to carry echoes of another time. As he played, he added his own flourishes, improvising around the core melody in a way that transformed the simple song into something rich and complex. The audience grew as word spread through the community center. By the time Tom finished, nearly 30 people had gathered in the auditorium, watching in appreciation as this man they'd barely noticed before revealed an unexpected gift. When the last notes faded, there was a moment of hushed silence before the applause began, louder this time with a few whistles and cheers mixed in. Tom stood nodding awkwardly at the audience. As people began to disperse, talking excitedly among themselves, Patricia made her way to the stage. "I see you've been thinking about my offer," she said, smiling. Tom ran a hand through his hair. "I wasn't planning this. It just happened. The best things often do." She gestured to the departing crowd. "You've got a fan club already." Tom laughed softly. "I doubt they'd be interested in actual lessons. Playing a few nice pieces is different from teaching beginners." "Maybe," Patricia agreed. "But I saw their faces, Tom. You connected with them. That's what makes a good teacher. Not just skill, but the ability to make others feel something." Before Tom could respond, a voice called out from the back of the auditorium. "Dad." Tom looked up to see Lily running down the aisle toward the stage, her face alight with excitement. Behind her was Mrs. Gonzalez, their neighbor who had brought Lily to the center after her playdate. "You were playing again!" Lily exclaimed as she reached the stage. "Mrs. Gonzalez said she could hear it all the way in the parking lot, and I knew it was you." Tom smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm. "Just playing around a bit." "It wasn't just playing around," said a new voice. Tom turned to see an older man he didn't recognize approaching the piano. The man was well-dressed, with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone used to being listened to. "Robert Chen," the man said, extending his hand to Tom. "I'm on the board of directors here at the center." Tom wiped his palm on his uniform pants before shaking the offered hand. "Tom Rivers, I'm the evening maintenance staff." "So I've gathered," Mr. Chen said with a small smile. "But you're clearly much more than that." He gestured toward the piano. "Where did you study?" The question took Tom by surprise. "Eastman," he answered automatically. "Though I didn't finish my degree." Mr. Chen's eyebrows rose. "Impressive nonetheless. Patricia tells me you're considering teaching our youth music program." Tom glanced at Patricia. who was watching the exchange with interest. "I'm thinking about it," he admitted. "Well, I'd like to encourage you to do more than think about it," Mr. Chen said. "The board has been discussing ways to expand our arts programming. Attendance at music events has been declining, and we're looking for ways to revitalize interest." He looked thoughtfully at the piano, then back at Tom. "What I just heard gives me an idea. We hold a fundraiser concert every spring to support the center's programs. It's usually a rather predictable affair. Local amateur musicians, a few talented youngsters. Nothing wrong with that, but nothing particularly inspiring either." Mr. Chen's eyes took on an enthusiastic gleam. "But a concert featuring someone of your caliber, that would be something different. Something that could generate real interest and support." Tom blinked, not sure he was understanding. "You want me to perform? At a fundraiser?" "As the main attraction, yes." Mr. Chen nodded firmly. "Based on what I just heard, I believe you could draw quite a crowd, and it would be an excellent way to launch our expanded music program, with you as our new instructor." Tom felt as if the conversation was moving too fast, spinning away from him. "Mr. Chen, I appreciate the offer, but I haven't played seriously in years. And I have responsibilities, my regular job. We would compensate you appropriately, of course," Mr. Chen interrupted. "Both for the performance and for teaching. Patricia can work with you on the details, but I'm confident we could arrange something that would make it worth your while." Lily was practically bouncing with excitement. "Dad, you have to say yes, you have to." Tom looked from his daughter's eager face to Patricia's encouraging smile to Mr. Chen's expectant expression. He felt a flutter of something he hadn't experienced in a very long time, not just hope but possibility. For years, his world had narrowed to the essential: work, provide, survive. Music had been a luxury he couldn't afford, a dream he'd set aside for more practical concerns. But now, somehow, it was being offered back to him, not just as a memory or a stolen moment, but as a path forward. I'd need some time to prepare," he said slowly. "To practice, if I were to perform." Mr. Chen's face broke into a wide smile. "So that's a yes?" Tom took a deep breath. "It's a maybe, but a strong maybe." "I'll take it," Mr. Chen said, clearly pleased. "Patricia can show you the music room tomorrow. It has an upright you can use for practice." He checked his watch. "I'm afraid I have another appointment, but I look forward to hearing more of your playing, Mr. Rivers." As Mr. Chen walked away, Tom felt slightly dazed by the turn of events. Just a few days ago, he had been invisible, just the man who emptied the trash and cleaned the floors. Now people were looking at him differently, seeing him. "So," Patricia said, "shall I put you on the schedule for Thursday evening? Our first class is at 6, beginners, ages 8 to 12. Tom looked down at Lily, who was watching him with such pride and hope that it made his chest ache. He thought of Beth, of the dreams they'd shared, of the music that had brought them together. "Yes," he said finally. "Put me on the schedule." As Patricia walked away to make the arrangements, Tom sat back down at the piano bench, Lily climbing up beside him. He placed his hands on the keys and for the first time in years allowed himself to think of the future as something more than just getting through another day. "Play something else, Dad," Lily requested softly. "Something Mom would like." Tom nodded and began to play. Thursday evening arrived faster than Tom expected. He stood outside the music room at the community center, his stomach in knots. Through the small window in the door, he could see a group of children inside talking and laughing among themselves. Some were sitting at the few keyboards lined up against the wall, randomly pressing keys and making faces at the sounds. Tom checked his watch. 5 minutes to 6. 5 minutes until he officially became a piano teacher. "You look like you're about to face a firing squad, not a bunch of kids." Tom turned to see Patricia approaching with an encouraging smile. "I think I'd prefer the firing squad," Tom admitted. "At least that would be quick." Patricia laughed. "They won't bite. Well, Joey might, but we've been working on that." Tom raised his eyebrows, and Patricia patted his arm. That was a joke. They're all good kids, eager to learn. Tom nodded, taking a deep breath. He'd spent the past 2 days preparing for this moment. The center had given him a key to the music room so he could practice during his lunch breaks and after his cleaning shift. His fingers felt more limber already, muscle memory returning with each hour at the keyboard. "Where's Lily tonight?" Patricia asked. "Library club. Mrs. Gonzalez will bring her by at 7:30. Tom straightened his shoulders. "Guess it's time." "Huh? You'll be wonderful," Patricia said confidently. "Just be yourself." Tom wasn't entirely sure who himself was anymore. The janitor who'd become invisible over the years, or the musician who was slowly reawakening. But he nodded anyway and opened the door. The chatter in the room gradually died down as the children noticed him. 8 pairs of eyes studied him curiously. Tom recognized most of them from around the center: the girl with the red glasses, who always had her nose in a book, the twins who played basketball in the gym, the quiet boy who usually sat alone during activity time. "Good evening," Tom said, his voice more formal than he'd intended. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I'm Tom Rivers, and I'll be your piano teacher." A boy with tousled brown hair raised his hand immediately. "Aren't you the janitor?" There it was, the question Tom had been dreading. But before he could respond, a girl with braids spoke up. "He's also an amazing pianist, Kevin. My mom was here Monday night and heard him play. She said it was the most beautiful thing ever." Tom felt heat rising in his face. "Thank you, Zoe," the girl supplied. "Thank you, Zoe. And yes, Kevin, I am also part of the maintenance staff here." Tom decided honesty was the best approach. "I've been playing piano since I was about your age, and Mrs. Williams asked if I would teach this class." Kevin seemed satisfied with this explanation. Another hand shot up. "Yes?" Tom pointed to a small girl with curly hair. "Are you famous?" The question made Tom laugh, releasing some of his tension. "No, definitely not famous, just someone who loves music." He moved toward the upright piano at the front of the room. "How many of you have played piano before?" 3 hands went up. "Great," Tom said, feeling himself relax a bit. "And the rest of you are beginners?" The remaining children nodded. "That's perfect. We're all starting this journey together." And with that, Tom began his first piano lesson. He started simply, showing them the layout of the keyboard, explaining the pattern of white and black keys. To his surprise, the children were attentive, asking good questions and showing genuine interest. By the time the hour was up, Tom had taught them their first 5-finger exercise and a simple melody using just 3 notes. The look of accomplishment on their faces when they got it right was unexpectedly rewarding. "That was excellent work, everyone," Tom said as parents began arriving to pick up their children. "Practice what we learned today, and next week we'll add a few more notes." As the children filed out, several parents approached Tom, introducing themselves and thanking him for taking over the class. Tom was still getting used to being noticed, to having people look him in the eye and speak to him as a professional, rather than someone who blended into the background. Zoe, the girl with braids, lingered after the others had left. "Mr. Rivers," she said shyly, "would you play something before we go, please? My mom told me how good you are." Tom glanced at the clock. He had a short break before his intermediate class at 7. "Sure," he said. "One quick piece," Zoe called, to her mother, who was waiting by the door, and they both sat down to listen. A few other parents who were still in the hallway peeked in curiously. Tom sat at the piano and played a short Schubert piece, light and cheerful, perfect for a spring evening. When he finished, Zoe's eyes were wide with admiration. "Wow," she breathed. "I want to play like that someday." "You can," Tom told her, surprised by how much he meant it. "It just takes practice and patience." After Zoe and her mother left, Tom remained at the piano, thoughtfully playing a few idle notes. Teaching had been nothing like he expected. He'd been so worried about what to say, how to explain things, whether the children would listen to him. But once he started talking about music, something he'd loved his entire life, the words had come naturally. Over the next few weeks, a routine developed. Monday evenings were for practice. Tom would arrive early for his cleaning shift and spend an hour in the music room, working on pieces for the spring fundraiser concert, which was now just a month away. Tuesdays and Thursdays were teaching days, the beginners at 6, intermediate students at 7. The rest of the time he continued his regular maintenance duties. It was a juggling act, especially with Lily's school and activities, but they were making it work. Mrs. Gonzalez was a godsend, helping with Lily when Tom's schedule got tight. And Lily herself was thriving, proud of her father's new role at the center. She'd even started taking piano lessons from him at home, on a small keyboard Patricia had found in the center's storage room and lent to them. One Tuesday evening, as Tom was locking up the music room after his last class, Patricia approached him with an excited expression. "Tom, you need to see this," she said, holding out her phone. Tom took it, puzzled. The screen showed a social media post, a video titled, "Hidden Talent, Janitor's Amazing Piano Performance." It had over 50,000 views. "What is this?" he asked, confused. "Remember that first night you played the Chopin piece? When all the teens came in to listen? One of them recorded it on their phone. It's been shared all over local social media." Tom felt a strange mix of embarrassment and pride as he watched the first few seconds of the video, enough to see himself at the piano, completely absorbed in the music, unaware of being recorded. "I'm not sure how I feel about this," he admitted, handing the phone back to Patricia. "People are inspired by your story, Tom. The comments are overwhelmingly positive." She scrolled through some of them. "Beautiful playing. This man has a gift. Why is he working as a janitor with talent like that?" The last comment made Tom frown. "There's nothing wrong with being a janitor." "Of course not," Patricia agreed quickly. "But you have to admit, this could be good publicity for the fundraiser concert. Mr. Chen is thrilled. Ticket sales have already doubled from last year and it's still weeks away." Tom hadn't considered that his performance might draw a real crowd. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. "I need to practice more," he said, half to himself. Patricia smiled. "That's why I wanted to show you this. The board has approved a temporary adjustment to your schedule. For the next month until the concert, you can reduce your maintenance hours and spend more time on music, both teaching and practicing. The pay will stay the same." Tom stared at her. "Really?" "Really. Mr. Chen is convinced this concert will be our most successful fundraiser in years. He's even talking about expanding the music program, offering scholarships." She paused. "Tom, this could become a full-time position for you, if the interest continues." The possibility hung in the air between them. A full-time music position, teaching, maybe even performing occasionally. Doing what he loved instead of just what paid the bills. "I don't know what to say," Tom admitted. "Say you'll think about it," Patricia suggested. "For now, focus on the concert, one step at a time." As Tom walked home that evening, they'd splurged on an apartment closer to the center within walking distance. His mind was spinning with possibilities. For so long he'd convinced himself that his dreams of a life in music were gone for good, sacrificed on the altar of adult responsibilities. But now, improbably, a door was opening. When he reached their apartment building, he saw Lily waiting at the window. She waved eagerly when she spotted him. His heart swelled with love for this child who had never doubted him, who had seen the musician in him even when he'd forgotten that part of himself. Upstairs, Lily greeted him with a hug and exciting news of her own. "Dad, guess what? My science project got picked for the district fair." "That's fantastic, Lilybug." Tom hung up his jacket. "When is the fair?" 3 weeks from Saturday," she said, bouncing on her toes. "You'll be able to come, right? It's in the morning, so it shouldn't interfere with your classes." 3 weeks from Saturday. Tom's stomach dropped. "Lily, that's the same day as the fundraiser concert." Lily's face fell. "Oh, I forgot." Tom sat down on their worn couch, pulling Lily down beside him. "I'm so sorry. The concert is in the evening, but there's a dress rehearsal most of the day." He ran a hand through his hair. Maybe I can talk to Mr. Chen, see if I can step out for a couple of hours. It's okay, Dad. Lily interrupted, her voice small but determined. Your concert is important. Mrs. Gonzalez can take me. Tom studied his daughter's face. She was trying so hard to be mature about this, but he could see the disappointment in her eyes. For years, he'd never missed a school event, a science fair, a parent-teacher conference. His presence was the one constant in Lily's life after her mother's death. And yet this concert was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. A chance to reclaim a part of himself he'd thought was lost forever, and perhaps even to build a better future for both of them. No, he said finally. Your science fair is important too. We'll figure something out, I promise. We're in this together, right? Lily's smile returned and she leaned against his shoulder. Right. Tom put his arm around her, thinking about the video that was circulating online, about the classes he was teaching, about the concert that was fast approaching. A month ago, he had been virtually invisible, just the man who cleaned the floors at the community center. Now suddenly people saw him, really saw him. It was terrifying, it was wonderful, it was complicated. But for the first time in years, Tom felt fully alive. The weeks leading up to the concert flew by in a blur of activity. Tom's days took on a new rhythm, teaching in the evenings, practicing during lunch breaks and early mornings, with maintenance work filling the gaps in between. The small keyboard in their apartment rarely fell silent, as either Tom or Lily could usually be found playing. With just 1 week until the big day, Tom still hadn't resolved the scheduling conflict between Lily's science fair and his concert. He'd spoken to Mr. Chen about missing part of the dress rehearsal, but the board chairman had been reluctant to agree, stressing how important Tom's presence was for the entire event. I understand family commitments, Mr. Chen had said, but this concert has become our biggest fundraiser in years. We've sold over 300 tickets already, largely based on your performance. The pressure was mounting. Tom felt it each time he sat down at the piano, each time he saw a new flyer for the concert, with his name prominently displayed. Patricia had hired a professional photographer to take publicity photos of him playing, and these now hung in the center's lobby alongside the concert announcement. People Tom had never met were stopping him in the hallways to tell him how excited they were to hear him play. His beginner students looked at him with newfound awe, especially after watching clips of his playing online. The video of his Chopin performance had now been viewed over 100,000 times and had been picked up by the local news. Through it all, Lily remained his steadfast supporter, proudly telling everyone that the famous pianist was her dad. But Tom couldn't shake the feeling that he was letting her down by not being able to attend her science fair. No matter how he tried to arrange things, the timing just wouldn't work. 3 days before the concert, Tom was practicing in the music room when Patricia knocked on the door. Tom, do you have a minute? He stopped playing and turned on the bench. Sure, what's up? Patricia entered, followed by a woman Tom didn't recognize, stylishly dressed, with an air of quiet confidence. This is Diane Taylor, Patricia said. She's the director of the Pine Creek Symphony Orchestra. Tom stood up, suddenly aware of his rumpled work clothes and the dark smudge of cleaning solution on his sleeve. Nice to meet you. Likewise, Diane said, shaking his hand firmly. I've heard a lot about you from Patricia, and I've seen the video of your playing. Very impressive. Thank you, Tom said, unsure where this was heading. Diane came to me with an interesting proposal, Patricia explained, her eyes bright with excitement. The symphony is looking for a pianist for their education program. It's a part-time position, but it could eventually lead to performance opportunities as well. Tom blinked in surprise. You're offering me a job? I'd like to hear you play in person before making any decisions, Diane clarified. But yes, potentially. We're expanding our youth outreach, bringing classical music to schools throughout the county. We need someone who can play well, obviously, but who also connects with young people. Patricia speaks very highly of your teaching abilities. Tom's mind was racing. A position with the symphony, even a part-time one, would be a major step toward rebuilding his music career. But it would also mean bigger changes to their lives, possibly a different schedule, maybe even relocation if the work took him to schools across the county. I'm flattered, he said carefully. But I have to think about how this would affect my daughter. She's my first priority. Of course, Diane nodded. There's no rush. Come to our offices next week for an informal audition and we can discuss the details. She handed him a business card. The concert on Saturday will be excellent practice. I'll be in the audience. After Diane left, Tom sat back down at the piano, his fingers hovering over the keys without playing. Patricia watched him, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. This is quite a turn of events, she said. A month ago you were mopping floors and hiding your talent. Now you're being recruited by the symphony. Tom shook his head in disbelief. It doesn't seem real. It's real, Patricia assured him. And you deserve it. Tom played a few distracted notes. I still haven't figured out how to be at Lily's science fair. It starts at 10 in the morning, but the dress rehearsal begins at 9. Patricia considered this. The first hour is mostly setup and sound checks. I could cover for you until 11, then you'd need to be back for the run-through at 11:30. Tom's face brightened. Really? You'd do that? Of course. Family comes first. She smiled. Besides, we can't have our star pianist distracted by guilt during the performance. Thank you, Tom said, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. I'll tell Lily tonight. The news that he could attend at least part of her science fair lit up Lily's face. She threw her arms around him, then immediately began explaining her project again, something about plant growth under different light conditions, with renewed enthusiasm. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Tom sat at their small keyboard, with headphones on, practicing the pieces for the concert. His fingers moved smoothly over the keys as he played through the Chopin nocturne that had started all of this. Then the Debussy that reminded him so much of Beth. For the concert finale, he had chosen to perform an original composition, something he hadn't done in years. It was a piece he'd begun writing when Lily was born but had never completed. Now, with music back in his life, he'd finally finished it, titling it simply, For Lily. As he played the gentle, hopeful melody, Tom thought about how much had changed in such a short time. From invisible to center stage, from just getting by to dreaming again. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear. Tom helped Lily set up her science project at the fair, proudly watching as she explained her experiment to the judges. He stayed as long as he could, giving her a big hug before rushing back to the community center for the dress rehearsal. Theseus. Day passed in a whirlwind of preparations. The auditorium had been transformed with proper stage lighting, a professional sound system, and flowers arranged around the grand piano. The backstage area buzzed with activity as other performers, local musicians who would open the show, warmed up and chatted nervously. Tom found a quiet corner to call Lily and Mrs. Gonzalez, who had stayed with her at the science fair. Dad, I won second place. Lily's voice bubbled with excitement. That's amazing, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. Tom felt a pang that he hadn't been there for the award ceremony, but the pride in Lily's voice soothed it somewhat. Mrs. Gonzalez is bringing me to your concert now. Lily continued. We're going to sit in the front row. I can't wait to see you, Tom said. I have a surprise for you in the program. After they hung up, Tom changed into the suit that Patricia had helped him pick out, his first new suit in years. Looking at himself in the mirror, he barely recognized the man staring back at him. Gone was the invisible janitor in the gray uniform. In his place stood a musician, ready to take the stage. Evening came, and with it, the audience. From his position, backstage, Tom could hear the murmur of voices as the auditorium filled. Patricia had told him they'd sold out all 500 seats, plus standing room at the back. The opening acts went smoothly. A string quartet of high school students, a local jazz trio, and a singer from the community choir. Then came the intermission, and after that it would be Tom's turn. As he waited in the wings, Tom felt surprisingly calm. The nerves that had plagued him all week had quieted, replaced by a steady certainty. This was where he belonged. This was who he was meant to be. Patricia appeared beside him, squeezing his arm encouragingly. "Ready?" Tom nodded. "Ready?" The stage lights dimmed, then came back up as Patricia walked to center stage to introduce him. Her voice carried clearly through the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to introduce our featured performer this evening. Many of you know him from the video that has captured hearts across our community and beyond. Others know him as a dedicated teacher or as the father of a very talented young scientist." A ripple of appreciative laughter moved through the audience. "I've had the privilege of watching his journey these past few weeks. A journey of rediscovery and renewal. Please welcome to the stage, Tom Rivers." The applause was thunderous as Tom walked out. He paused to bow, then took his seat at the piano. In the front row, just as promised, sat Lily, her face shining with pride. Beside her was Mrs. Gonzalez, and next to her, Tom recognized Diane from the symphony. But in that moment, they all faded away. It was just him and the piano now, just the music waiting to be brought to life. Tom began to play. The Chopin came first, his fingers finding the familiar paths with confidence and grace. He could feel the audience's rapt attention, the hushed appreciation as the piece built to its emotional peak. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of perfect silence before the applause erupted. He moved on to the Debussy, allowing himself to think of Beth, to channel the love they had shared into the music. Somewhere in the middle of the piece, he glanced up to see Lily wiping tears from her eyes, and he knew she was thinking of her mother too. After two more classical selections, Tom paused. He leaned toward the microphone that had been placed beside the piano. "For my final piece tonight, I'd like to play something original," he said, his voice steady. "A composition I began 10 years ago when my daughter was born, but only recently completed. It's called For Lily." He looked directly at his daughter as he began to play. The piece started simply, a childlike melody that gradually grew more complex, weaving in themes of joy and challenge, love and loss, hope and renewal. It told their story, all the difficult years, all the sacrifices, all the love that had carried them through. By the time the final notes sounded, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. Tom himself was surprised to find tears on his cheeks. The audience rose to their feet, applauding wildly. Lily broke protocol to run onto the stage and throw her arms around her father. As they embraced, surrounded by the continuing applause, Tom whispered in her ear, "Thank you for believing in me." "I always knew you were special, Dad," Lily whispered back. "I'm so glad everyone else knows it now, too." Later that night, as they walked home under a sky full of stars, Lily's science fair ribbon in one hand and a bouquet of flowers from his performance in the other, Tom felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, decisions about the symphony position, conversations about their future, practical matters to be sorted out. But tonight, he was simply a father walking home with his daughter, both of them with hearts full of music and pride and possibilities. "Dad?" Lily asked as they neared their apartment building. "Yes? Are you happy?" Tom looked down at his daughter's upturned face, so earnest in the moonlight. He thought about the long path that had led him here, all the grief and struggle, all the moments of giving up pieces of himself to keep going, to be the parent Lily needed. And now, somehow, finding his way back. "Yes," he said, meaning it completely. "I am very happy." Lily smiled, satisfied. "Me too." And together they walked, up the steps toward home, toward tomorrow, toward the music that would now fill both their lives.